gone through, and it should be streaming to YouTube in just a second. Thank you again for your patience.
Sure. Yep, I see that it's streaming live on YouTube now. So, as a recap, welcome to the NVTA Technical Advisory Committee meeting for November 20th, 2024. We had already approved the past meeting notes from June and October, and we're now in Mr. Lunge's presentation for cost overruns and cost estimates, underestimates. Please continue.
Thank you. As I noted, we did present the authority last week with three options. Do not fund underestimates overruns, fund them with a option for a petition to be submitted. And that is in B2 on the page in front of you. And I went through the wording, just noting that in addition to the extraordinary circumstances which could not have been anticipated, we are now adding the word unique and extraordinary. The word unique is basically intended to do away with things like inflation, which would be impacting all projects. The basis for the petition process is designed to be very rare. If you look at the provisions, the petition would have to come in a way that coincides with the 2-year update to the 6-year program, so that we're not looking at any of these as kind of a one-off. And that also makes sure that the work that is done to select projects in the context of the requirements of the Code of Virginia is done. The petitions would be submitted to the CFO and the Principal Transportation Programming and Planning. That's so that we have a fluid or a structured way of reviewing these. Progress on the petition reviews would be dependent upon the promptness, completeness, and clarity of the project sponsors' responses to NVTA's inquiries. In other words, you can't just submit a petition and have the 2-year update program being acted on and not give us information. Very importantly, the NVTA will have the provision to use services of an independent outside consultant, because if it's unique, extraordinary, and could not have been anticipated, in all likelihood, it may be outside of our staff skill set to fully evaluate those factors. That cost will be borne by the project sponsor. One of the things we talked about at the authority meeting was, with the potential for $1 billion in underestimates overruns from various causes, if we were to build the capacity to do this in-house, then it would cost essentially $1 million and require the hiring of potentially 4 staff people. This way, by using the on-call services, hopefully we won't get any petitions because everybody will be happy. But if we do get a petition, then we can call on the outside resources to help us evaluate it. I do want to mention, because it's not in the written staff report, but was discussed at the authority meeting, when we talk about not funding underestimates or overruns, now included in that is project transfers. So where in July of this year, we saw a jurisdiction asking to transfer money from one approved or soon to be approved authority project to another, that will no longer be on the table. And with that, I thank the committee for its guidance last month, and ask if you have anything to add to this or if you have any questions.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what might constitute a unique and extraordinary?
Sorry, Mr. Spielberg, I'm having trouble hearing you, and I think my volume's up all the way.
I'm sorry. I'll try moving closer.
Yeah, there you go.
An example of what might be considered a unique and extraordinary circumstance?
I think if the question is what would be an example of a unique and extraordinary unanticipatable circumstances, 2 were discussed at the authority meeting. One was unpreviously known burial grounds, although there was some discussion that that really shouldn't qualify. Another topic, another point was if federal, as an example, federal funding was cut for a project. And that discussion went to the detail of, well, if federal funding was cut because of a violation or an error or something like that on the project, that would not be eligible. It would basically be if, and I think I'm not elected, so I'll use the words, if a new administration targeted a particular project through no fault of the project, then that may be a circumstance that would be considered. I do want to note the policy itself is specifically going to avoid setting any circumstances or scenarios. It's not going to reference them. Further, any petition that does come to the authority will go through the process outlined in the policy when it's developed, and a conclusion will go to the authority, or a decision will go to the authority. It will or will not have a staff recommendation. It will or will not have a TAC recommendation or a PPC recommendation, but no petitions are going to be left in a bureaucratic limbo. Hopefully that answered your question.
So did you say that the any of these petitions would be settled at the authority level? They wouldn't go down to like the TACs or the other ACs?
They will be treated like another project in the 2-year update to the 6-year program.
Okay.
So it would come to you much the same way as project applications do.
Fair. That's fair. Ahmad has his hand up.
Yeah. So
Really, the only addition to the process is the finance committee will also be involved. Currently, the finance committee doesn't look at project applications and express any opinions on those updates.
Yeah. Armand?
So, not necessarily 100% germane to what we were just discussing, but definitely linked and parallel to it. So I'm just curious. As we've had in the very recent past, a presidential election, which very well could result in tariffs based on what the administration's saying. What is the authority planning to do as far as recommending building contingency in as much as 30 or 40% contingency maybe into some projects going forward, given the potential for tariffs that could crop up, very shortly. So I'm just curious, and how does that impact this policy as well?
Well, that would be a project sponsor decision at the application level for projects that are coming in for consideration. But if tariffs were imposed broadly, which appears to be the suggestion, that would not be unique to a particular project.
Understood. I'm just thinking it could have wide-ranging effects across multiple projects.
It definitely would, but the point of the policy starting from a position of no is for the authority not to have to absorb essentially the risk for all projects.
Understood. I didn't necessarily think it would change the policy because it would not be, therefore, in that case, a unique circumstance. However, obviously something that could become a problem across the board. So I was just wondering more than anything else, whether or not, obviously it's up to the project sponsor, but I'm wondering if the authority is going to make an effort to recommend building contingency in as part of projects through the next couple of cycles. So I just am curious. I mean, I don't know that you've even made a decision or even discussed it at this point, but just curious more than anything else.
Well, one of the things that we have noted in the staff reports and in the discussions with the committees and the authority is we do not set standards for how the project sponsors determine the appropriate amount of contingency, or do their cost estimations and stuff like that. Mostly because we don't have the staff level or that depth of background. Additionally, if we set standards, then there's the potential that we could be held responsible for the circumstances that are outside of the standard. So it really is a choice of the project sponsor.
Okay, thank you.
If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to respond to them. Otherwise, we are on a time frame to present the draft policy to the authority in February. And I know Mr. Jasper and his team is struggling with the Christmas holidays and New Year's to potentially get this in front of you again before that happens. And I thank you for your cooperation, patience, and input with that. But I do think it was very important that when we discussed this with the authority, we were able to say that the topic had been discussed at the TAC and that we had gotten some feedback on it. And I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the clear consensus from the authority is to not fund underestimates and overruns, and have the petition process be very limited and very rarely used.
I wasn't at the October meeting, so apologies if this was discussed then. Were there any compelling reasons or compelling arguments to the contrary?
No.
Okay.
I will note, since you weren't there, because I think this is critical to that discussion, this topic was reviewed in 2015. There was an advisory panel established, and the work of that panel went from July of 2015 to October of 2016, and actually came up with 47 issues that would need to be included in a policy to fund overruns. And the decision at that point was to not pursue it. However, a policy of not funding overruns wasn't established. And I think a lot of the discussion has benefited from that 2015, 2016. And that study is attached as an attachment to the staff report that Alyssa has on the screen. So that whole study is in your package.
Yes, thank you for including it.
Are overruns, are they typical? Are they rare? I mean, how big an issue is this?
We don't have a real quantifiable response to that because most project sponsors don't really include us in overruns. Most projects have multiple funding sources, and the project sponsor's source of funds is one of those. And
fair enough.
A key ingredient, I think, in this, and the reluctance to have the risk transfer to the authority, is NVTA is uniquely positioned where we have projects that go throughout a region, whereas a county or city has a capital improvement plan. So if one project gets into difficulty, cost overruns, they can manage it through delaying another project, downscaling the project, or moving money from another project, or adding more money to the project. It's very difficult, I would say, essentially impossible to do that from the authority's perspective, being a funder of projects across the whole region. We don't have the ability to really make those decisions and tell one jurisdiction that their project has to be delayed or downsized because another jurisdiction's project ran into a cost situation. Randy, I think you're on mute. If you're
I got somebody at my door. That's what I'm trying to say. But a thought came across my mind, and I missed the last meetings. I was on a long bike ride. and meant to note that for the meeting minutes. Seeing that the NVTA does do funding, but it is administered by locality, VDOT, whoever it is. Do we need a policy for additional funding from NVTA? As you mentioned, that is handled by the locality or whoever's administering the project and delivering the project. And I would imagine it's incumbent on them to assure that funding to finish said project would come from them. Just curious where I'm trying to picture when this would even be a thing for NVTA to do.
When a project sponsor signs a standard project agreement, which doesn't change project to project, the boilerplate never changes. What is different is the project application is appended to that standard project agreement. That standard project agreement is a contract. And by the project sponsor signing that contract, they agree to complete the project. So if they have to bring in more funds, they have to do that.
Okay, now I see. Okay.
If they attempt to downsize the project, then we would have to potentially reevaluate the project to see if we're still getting the region is still getting what it bargained for when it signed the contract on our side.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's good. Any other questions? Was this the end of your presentation, Mike? Any other questions for Mike before we let him go and we move on? Very well. I believe next on our agenda, Ms. Backman.
I don't have anything tonight, so thank you. I just want to wish. I know, I know. Remember this, mark this in the minutes for future meetings.
All right.
I just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. So thank you for all of your work on helping us bring something forward to the authority about this policy. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. And this, even with the delay in the YouTube streaming, we're beating by far the 59-minute rule. So thank you for joining tonight, and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I guess we need to make a motion to adjourn, or if Michelle has a question.
Is our December meeting in person?
I believe it is.
Okay.
I believe we can't do 2 virtuals in a row, correct? Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You can. Yep.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Adjournment.
And a second.
Second.
There we go. I hear none opposed. We're out of here. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.